Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Arpat Senocak. I'm the president of the Swiss Chamber of Commerce in Turkey, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar organized by our Chamber of Commerce. Dear Mr. Ambassador, Mr. Consul General, dear friends of the Swiss Chamber of Commerce, and dear friends of Switzerland, we have a very crowded audience today. Kindly joining this webinar, which is the 8th of a series of webinars we've started to organize for about a year throughout the pandemic to discuss several topics, health-related, medicine-related, technology-related, focusing on the measures of companies and states have been taking to fight against the pandemic. Today, we will be discussing the science behind the COVID vaccine and how the future of business can be rewritten. For this, our dear friend and the board member of the Swiss Chamber of Commerce, Dr. Avinash Potnis, General Managing Director of Novartis Pharma in Turkey, will be moderating the discussion with a panel of speakers that Dr. Potnis will be introducing. This event is very kindly supported and sponsored by Union Bancaire Privée, UBP Bank, which is also a valuable member of our chamber, and that we heartfully thank for their support. Now, before giving the floor to Avinash for introducing the speakers, I would also like to kindly introduce Mr. Consul General of Switzerland, Julien Thöni, who will be addressing opening remarks. Julien, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very glad to be with you this afternoon and to welcome you in today's webinar of the Swiss Chamber of Commerce in Turkey dedicated to vaccination. I thank here the two panelists, Mr. Zoldan and Dr. Gökhan Duman. I'm also grateful to Dr. Avinash Potnis for this initiative to organize the discussion. My thanks also go to the Chamber and also to the sponsor. Vaccination against COVID-19 is a topic which has become global. In every family, media, circle of government and company, vaccination is discussed. After 1 year of pandemic and so many victims, vaccination represents both the light at the end of the tunnel and also a topic of strategic importance. I would like to seize this opportunity of welcoming you today to make 3 points. First, this webinar discussion on vaccination reflects the strong commitment of the Swiss pharmaceutical sector in our bilateral economic relation with Turkey. Swiss pharmaceutical exports to Turkey represent 28% of the total Swiss exports. And Novartis is also one of the most important members of what I call with affection our Swiss family in Turkey. It represents Swiss values which are dear to us, notably quality, innovation, efficiency, and reliability. Secondly, Switzerland is also doing its best to fight the pandemic within its border, also with a large vaccination campaign. For the moment, out of 8 million inhabitants, 1.6 million have received the first shot in Switzerland. The campaign will accelerate in the coming weeks. Furthermore, Switzerland energetically takes part in international efforts to combat the pandemic. It intervenes at the diplomatic level to promote international cooperation and takes part in assistance programs. To date, Switzerland has contributed to around $75 million to a global initiative to bring together public and private sectors with the aim to accelerate equitable access to COVID-19 diagnostics, treatment, and vaccine. Furthermore, Switzerland participates with $20 million in the programs called COVAX to ensure equitable access to vaccines for 92 low and middle income countries. It is clear that the race will be won if every country is in the position to effectively fight the pandemic. Third, we know that vaccination is the way forward to stop the pandemic, but we will also be progressively absorbed by the social and psychological consequences of the pandemic. I think notably of the young generation, children, young adults, students who in many countries have not been able to study and socialize in a normal context for more than 1 year. This is a question which is also compelling for Consulate General responsible for delivering services to its community abroad. I look forward to the presentation and discussion of today and stop here for my introductory remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Arpat. Thank you so much, Mr. Thöni. We are in the second year of pandemic now, and we thought that I think probably we'll get over this challenge. But I think as time passes, as day come, I think probably we are into deeper and deeper challenges. First of all, I welcome all the participants on the webinar and the eminent speakers that we have. More importantly, background is that we discussed and debated on how we cover this topic. It's too wide, and we had to choose between the width and the depth. I mean, do we go too wide or do we go too deep? And therefore, we thought that I think we will first focus on the virus as such, the vaccination thereafter. But the main and the issue that everybody has on our mind, what is going to happen to the business? Is there any hope at the end of the tunnel? So we thought that we'll keep the disease aspect of COVID a little away from today's webinar. Probably we will have a separate webinar on disease as such, because that's another wider topic that we have on our hands. Today, I have a privilege to introduce two eminent speakers, and we are fortunate to have them on our panel today. So let me, first introduce Dr. Gökhan Duman. Now I'm going to read through because I don't want to miss a single word of it, because they have done so much in their career that I don't want to do injustice to their depth of their experience. So Dr. Gökhan Duman is the Director of Clinical Site Operations for Turkey, Russia, and Middle East in Pfizer. Dr. Duman joined Pfizer as Medical Manager of Oncology and Endocrinology Group in 2006 and quickly rose to the position of Director of Clinical Research in 2008. With his leadership skills and success in his role in Turkey, he was assigned as the Director of Clinical Research for Turkey, Eastern Europe, and Russia in 2012. This region was further expanded to his current designation as Director of Clinical Site Operations and Management for Turkey, Middle East, and African continent. Dr. Duman is leading R&D partnership projects for Pfizer in Turkey, but he's also the chairman of Clinical Trial Committee of AIFD, which is the Innovator Pharmaceutical Companies Association in Turkey. Through his membership of International Investors Association, we call it IASID in Turkey, he is actively promoting the investment climate in Turkey, and with an aim to develop Turkey as innovation and technology hub. Warm welcome, Dr. Duman. We are very happy to listen to you. The second eminent speaker that I have, and what a privilege I have to rather introduce him to, Zoldan is the CEO of Quantum Media Group, a global marketing and media company based out of New York. As an on-air TV personality, Ari can be seen regularly on Fox News, CNN, and CNBC covering technology, business, and innovation. He's a frequent source of journalists and is quoted regularly in major media outlets. He holds press credentials on Capitol Hill, the United Nations, and is a member of National Press Club in Washington, D.C. He is one of the few selected personalities to hold the position as an IBM Watson futurist. He's a regular on the lecture circuits and speaks passionately about entrepreneurship. He constantly talks about innovation. His unique and engaging approach has attracted over 100,000 business leaders in 50 countries around the world to attend these lectures. And of course, this number was till yesterday. We haven't added, those who are actually on this webinar. So, welcome to the two eminent speakers. What we can do is we can start with Dr. Duman to rather cover the vaccine and the virus part, and then we'll come to the business part with Ari. So over to Dr. Duman.
Thank you, Dr. Potnis. Distinguished members of Swiss Chamber of Commerce and distinguished participants. Now I will share with you my screen to share my slides. To be honest, I'm very honored to be with you in this program today. And I would like to thank the organizing committee for the invitation. The past year has seen the rapid global spread of SARS-CoV-2, the virus responsible for the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. And while non-pharmaceutical interventions have been playing a role in epidemic control, we think vaccination constitute the definitive long-term defense strategy against COVID-19 morbidity, mortality, and also transmission, offering the best of a return to normal life. Today, I will briefly present you the main points related to SARS-CoV-2 COVID-19 vaccine development and our new normal in clinical development during and potentially after the pandemic. Let's start with coronaviruses. Coronaviruses belong to the Coronaviridae family and are a large family of viruses. Some cause illness in humans, some cause illness in animals, such as bats or camels. Corona represents crown-like spikes, as you can see here on the picture. And as you all know, I think now, on the outer surface of the virus, so it was named as coronavirus. Human coronaviruses can cause mild illness, such as the common cold, as you know. However, some COVs can also cause severe illness, including severe acute respiratory syndrome, which is called SARS. And it's the virus causing SARS is called SARS-CoV, SARS coronavirus. And SARS-CoV-2 is a new strain of coronavirus that has not been previously identified in humans before this pandemic. The disease caused by SARS-CoV-2 is called COVID-19. It's called 19 because it was first reported in 2019. Actually, it was on 31st December of 2019 in Wuhan, China. Many of COVID-19 patients have had mild symptoms, which may resemble influenza, flu-like illness. However, 10% of those infected have developed pneumonia, and many requiring hospitalization. And until now, approximately 2.2% have died from this disease, unfortunately. As I said, vaccination is expected to be the definitive defense strategy against COVID-19. Now let's look at the basic principles of vaccination and COVID vaccine development. With vaccines, we safely deliver an antigen to the host, in this case humans, that creates an immune response. The host immune system is trained to recognize the pathogen when it's encountered naturally in the future. So vaccines are preventative, which increase the body's natural ability to fight the virus before the virus attacks you. So once you developed immunity to the virus-specific antigen through the vaccinations, then when you are exposed to the virus itself, your immune system can quickly destroy it before you become ill or seriously ill. Roughly said, there are four main approaches to design a vaccine, four main technologies, and their differences lie in whether they use a whole virus or just the parts of the virus, which are called subunits, or use a safe virus, which is called viral vector, to deliver specific subparts of the virus which is causing illness, or just the genetic material that provides the instructions for making specific proteins of the virus in the body. Let's look at those four main different technologies in more detail. The whole virus approach can use inactivated virus or live attenuated virus. This is the first way to make a vaccine, to take the disease-carrying virus and inactivate or kill it using chemicals, heat, or radiation. This approach uses technology that has been proven to work in people. Like, for example, this is the way the flu and polio vaccines are made. And vaccines can be manufactured on a reasonable scale. However, it requires special laboratory facilities because you have to grow the virus safely. And then it can take a relatively long production time. A live attenuated vaccine uses a living but weakened version of the virus, like the MMR vaccine is one of them. This approach uses similar technology to the inactivated vaccine and can be manufactured at scale. However, vaccines like this may not be suitable for people with compromised immune system, or the virus is aggressive, like in COVID, for example. That's why currently for COVID vaccine, within the whole virus technology, we are using the inactivated virus method. Viral vector vaccines use a safe virus to deliver specific subparts of the virus of interest. The safe virus can be like adenovirus, for example, so that it can trigger an immune response without causing the disease. To do this, the instructions for making particular parts of the pathogen of interest, in this case COVID-19 SARS-CoV-2, are inserted into the safe virus. The safe virus then serves as a platform or vector to deliver the protein into the body. The protein triggers the immune response in the body then. Ebola vaccine is a viral vector vaccine. And this type of vaccine can be developed relatively rapidly. A subunit vaccine, most of the time they are protein subunits. Subunit vaccine is one of the that only uses the very specific parts of the virus that the immune system needs to recognize. It doesn't contain the whole virus or use a safe virus as a vector. You just give the subunits, which can be proteins, and in COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2, they are the spike proteins, as you know. Most of the vaccines on the childhood schedule are subunit vaccines, actually, like diphtheria, tetanus, meningococcal meningitis, and also whooping cough. Then we have the genetic approach, which is using nucleic acids, DNA or RNA. Unlike vaccine approaches which use either a weakened or dead whole virus or parts of the virus, like subunits, and nucleic acid vaccine just uses a section of the genetic material, as you can see here, that provides the instructions for specific proteins of the virus. DNA, RNA are the instructions our cells use to make proteins. In our cells, DNA is first turned into messenger RNA, mRNA, which is then used as the blueprint to make specific proteins. So a nucleic acid vaccine delivers a specific set of instructions to our cells, either as DNA or mRNA, to them to make the specific protein that we want our immune system to recognize and respond to. And the important thing here is the nucleic acid approach is a new way of developing vaccines. And before COVID-19 pandemic, research in this area has progressed very fast, and some mRNA vaccines for COVID-19 received emergency use authorization, as you know. There are now several COVID vaccines in development with similar number of programs using these four main technologies: whole virus, protein subunit, nucleic acid, or viral vector. Because of this unprecedented pandemic situation, COVID vaccine development have been accelerated by pharma companies, scientists, and governments. We receive questions about the concerns about the fast delivery of this vaccine. So I will try to clarify that on this slide. Traditionally, there are sequential preclinical and 3 clinical development phases, phase 1, 2, 3, before a vaccine or drug is approved, which can take several years, as you can see here. However, for COVID vaccine, these development phases were managed in parallel, which significantly accelerated the vaccine development. And as I said, pharma companies, all regulatory bodies, ethics committees, investigators, all work hard and focused prioritizing vaccine development, which further accelerated all the processes to be completed before the approval. Around 80 vaccines, or maybe more than 80 vaccines now, because it's changing every week, are in clinical trial stage, and some of them have already been approved to be used. COVID vaccine clinical trials are conducted in several countries, and Turkey is one of those countries. We had the great opportunity as Pfizer to conduct clinical trial of Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine successfully in Turkey, thanks to Turkish MOH, ethics committees, our investigators, but first and foremost, Professor Uğur Şahin and Özlem Türeci. This shows and summarizes the current COVID-19 vaccine landscape, which I believe is promising. Some of these vaccines are already approved and in use, and some of them are still in clinical development, close to be approved. When we look at the production number, which are shown in billions here, as you can see, we would expect that majority of world population, about around 70% based on the projections, will be vaccinated by end of 2021, which is good news and very promising in fighting against COVID. Of course, it's not just fighting against COVID virus. We also need to continue our lives. And I think we found some ways to cope with it during this unprecedented pandemic. As an example from healthcare, telemedicine was started to be used much more frequently. On this slide, you can see that after pandemic, majority of urgent or non-urgent cares, here in gray and purple color, became virtual. When you compare 2020 to 2019, the number of patient visits are not significantly different, but majority of on-site visits were replaced by virtual visits. And digitalization has been used more and more in healthcare and pharmaceutical research and development. COVID pandemic accelerated this digitalization and the use of remote technologies. For clinical trials, telemedicine, electronic consent, electronic patient-reported outcome, electronic medical records, or similar tools or systems started to be utilized more frequently. And remote devices for patients, including wearables, will be more and more used. Home health, direct-to-patient delivery of clinical trial products have been used during the pandemic. And using all these technologies and tools, we continued the clinical development in pharma sector. As an example, virtual monitoring has also been used in our COVID vaccine study, which we conducted in Turkey, and it provided us the capability of monitoring the quality of data without going to the sites. When we think of three phases in crisis, respond, recover, and thrive, I think we responded very well to this pandemic, and now we are in recovery phase. And if we recover successfully, I hope we can find ways to thrive in the new normal. And so, science will win. Before finishing my presentation, I would like to thank again to the organizing committee and to you who joined us today in this program, because I think it's very important to be connected and support each other during this challenging pandemic days. Thank you very much. Back to you, Avinash.
Thank you, Gökhan. Thank you very much. In fact, the message that you brought up to all of us is, everything is not lost in last 1.5 years. In fact, the pharmaceutical industry as such learned how to collapse some of the development phases of clinical development of a product, a new product, and how to actually fast forward all the clinical developments of the new assets. But what you said at the end was really, enticing me to have to transfer this discussion to the hope side of it. You said thrive. So let's hand it over to Ari now, because this is what he is going to talk about. He is going to take us from the gloom to the glory side, I guess. So Ari, over to you.
Thank you, Avinash, and that was a wonderful presentation, Doctor. So thank you very much. I certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure the audience did as well. The team here collectively worked really hard in putting this together. So just want to thank the staff, the chamber, Pfizer, Novartis, and all the people involved for really executing a great seminar. So again, thank you very much, and thank you for the participants. I know we probably have about a dozen different countries and tons of different time zones. So thank you for making this happen, everyone. When I was talking to Avinash about what topic we would cover, Avinash thought about the light at the end of the tunnel. He said, Ari, why don't you talk about hope? And I thought, well, that's a no-brainer. I could certainly cover that. And when I sat down to my computer to start drafting the work and the presentation, it was actually a lot harder than I anticipated. When this is all over, when the pandemic is over, the death toll is obviously going to be north of, unfortunately, 1 million people. What type of hope can I actually share with people that really makes sense and that's going to resonate? And then I thought of a quote, and I'm a big fan of Dale Carnegie. He says, most of the important things in the world had been accomplished by people who have kept on trying when there seemed to be no hope at all. And I think that really resonated with me, and I hope it resonates with the audience as well. So on that note, I'm going to share my screen. So what type of sectors are we looking at in terms of rewriting the future of business? Looking at what happened, looking at the landscape over the past 100 years, obviously there's been historical events that have really created a paradigm shift in the world of business, in the world of technology, in the world of innovation. So we've identified a handful of different sectors that we think post-COVID is going to change dramatically, and hoping that some of the larger farmers, the larger pharma companies are going to be on board with this, and it takes it's a dual effort between the smaller companies that have the ability to be able to move and to pivot quicker, obviously, than the larger companies. So a collaboration between the two can actually create a much quicker change. So for telecommuting, when I put together the numbers, or I saw the numbers from Pew Research, it was quite surprising. We obviously knew that everyone was moving remote. The people that worked from home before COVID was around 20%. Currently working from home right now, 71%. And interestingly enough, given the option, about 54% would like to continue to work from home. So, the obvious question is, okay, you have people working from home. What are the opportunities as an entrepreneur, as a small business, as a larger business? What opportunities are there to build products and services in and around the remote, or to call it the digital nomad worker working from home? And obviously we see technologies that wrap around any type of messaging, anything that has to do with, obviously, with automation, down to even the comfort of working at home, and that could be a better chair, a better desk. But you're now dealing with an entire ecosystem of people moving from the cubicle office to home. So I think it's important for companies and small businesses to kind of look at that and see, where's there an opportunity to make money there. And the question is, and I was talking to Avinash and the team, is this going to be something that's permanent? And I'd love to answer some of those questions after the slides are presented. So we talk about business implications. We've all, the buzzwords today have been Slack, Teams, and Zoom. Looking at the numbers, 2021, it's close to $1 billion in revenue. 3 years ago, it was a fraction of that. And if you follow the company, the valuation of the company is about 17 times that, about a $17 billion valuation. Not giving a boost to the company or to the stock, but certainly on the financial side, something to look at. Microsoft Teams as well. In terms of the notes that the minutes that they were able to clock, it was about 2.7 billion. So these numbers are off the charts. The question is whether they're going to continue or not, whether they're going to drop off. I suspect they're going to plateau as people as people make the decision whether to go back to the office. Even in office, people are going to be using Microsoft Teams and Zoom as well as they continue down the road. So Zoom also has about half of the revenue with Slack, not too shabby at $622 million in revenue and 300 million users. We look at, obviously, a lot of people on the call obviously are very familiar with healthcare and pharma. What does that look like post-COVID? And telehealth obviously has seen a surge due to the risks posed by COVID-19. Kenneth Goodman, professor of medicine and director of the Miller School of Medicine, states something very interesting. He goes, the pandemic is fostering an accelerated digitalization. And the key word here is accelerated. There's no doubt this was going to happen. The pandemic, what it did, it kind of thrusted things forward by a couple of years, and we're seeing actually that it's working. The pandemic is fostering an accelerated digitalization of patient health histories and stimulating the creation of tools to allow these records to be shared more easily for both public health and clinical care. Let's move on to post-COVID implications. Telehealth visits, obviously, we've seen up 59%, and I think there's an opportunity there for entrepreneurs, sole proprietors, people in the mental health sector to be able to expand their products and services and use a lot of that time that they use for traveling to be able to visit patients online. Obviously, in the emerging markets, in places where people cannot get to a facility, to a clinic, obviously telehealth fills that void, and I think we're going to see a huge upswing in that sector as well. The visits for behavioral health up 109%, and then chronic illness. So we're seeing those numbers dramatically increase. Artificial intelligence. The question is this just a buzzword today? A lot of people are throwing out the word artificial intelligence. They're using the word AI. I would think 90% of people have no idea what it is, although I'm sure the group of people on this call do know what it is, and probably maybe better than I on the science side. But I could tell you from the lectures that I've given, from the responses that I've heard, and given that we're a marketing firm, we're getting an enormous amount of inbound inquiries and clients that are looking for marketing services in and around artificial intelligence. And we're seeing a huge increase in interest for people wanting these services to be able to go to market. The space is not crowded today, although the space will be crowded very soon. So for those small business owners, the entrepreneurs, and obviously large corporate America, to start moving the conversation about artificial intelligence is important, but moving it towards practical implications and asking the questions, how can AI work in my business? Can it work? It doesn't work in every business, but I would say we're going to see about 90% of businesses over the next decade utilize some form of artificial intelligence. So getting on the bandwagon now is important. We've all heard necessity is the mother of invention. AI is great. We're hearing wonderful things right now, but what are some of the challenges? We don't have right now the speeds, and uncertainty, and the lack of credible data is an issue. Daily mobility data on how many miles were driven within each zip code, for instance, in the country, effectiveness, and the stay-at-home orders, pandemic progression in the healthcare space. One company point to mention out there, there's a couple of startups right now that I believe are leading the pack, but Quantum Computing Inc. is a startup getting involved in the space. Predictive Oncology is another one that's trying to figure out how to, or actually they're doing a good job in utilizing AI in the pharma space. So I think it's important for the larger companies to look at smaller companies, seeing what works, and look to partner up with them. And obviously another challenge is track time and location dependent variations in human behavior during the pandemic. Retail, a big favorite for everyone here, whether it's online or offline. An interesting stat I came across the other day, only 11% of total retail sales is coming from e-commerce. We only know that the numbers are going up. I thought the numbers would be a lot higher. We're probably going to see in the next couple of years, it's going to be a 50-50 split between retail and e-commerce. Opportunities there to build products and services around e-com, I think, are incredible, and certainly the growth there is going to be explosive. So now, how a recession affects retail, whether we're in the process or whether we're in currently a recession, and that's up for debate. Where is there opportunities? And obviously, building a company during a recession, oddly enough, is actually a great time. Labor is more affordable, and opportunities is more present when people typically have more time to look at different opportunities. So 28, 29, e-commerce grew, brick and mortar retail declined, off-price discounting and emerging players appealed to a new consumer demand. And post-COVID, consumer retailer interactions defined by health and safety expectations, demands for convenience, will drive even more contactless transactions. So we're going to be seeing a lot of that as well. Retail trends, February, April 2020, no surprise, 20% down, which is a huge decrease, unfortunately. Very disappointing for the retailers. Clothing and accessory stores, 89%. Department stores went down by half, and about personal savings rate, I guess that was an interesting number, up 33%. E-com, which is a favorite of mine. A lot of companies continue to enter the space right now. Given my numbers before, 11%. Only 11% is total e-commerce, make up total e-commerce sales. So those numbers are going to grow. Digital sales obviously are growing. I hear a lot about the term in a lot of these emerging technologies, innovation sectors. It's the future. I think that's very, very wrong. It's not the future. It's here now. They're real life applications and products and services that are being used now. E-commerce adoption has been accelerated by about 4 to 6 years within a matter of just months, which I think is interesting to see, because we're seeing that, for instance, remote learning is working, and quite frankly, I think it's worked, all things considered, it's worked really, really well, given that everyone had to get up and running really quickly. The same thing with e-commerce companies. They were not ready for an increase or an acceleration in growth, yet they were able to manage really, really well, and most importantly, they were able to scale. Emphasis on delivery process, logistics is a big one. Lockdowns accelerated digital penetration for soft lines, apparel, footwear, linens, and other segments by about 2 years. So those growth numbers are really, really nice. And the emergence of new companies into the e-commerce space, like Stork, is another great example of how companies are emerging during this space. Media, one of my favorites. The early months of the pandemic saw a dramatic increase in the amount of time people spent accessing information about current events. If they were not home sitting on their couch, they were at a desk, and there was a lot of downtime there. So no surprise that Facebook, Netflix, and YouTube have all seen user numbers on their phone apps stagnate or fall off their website, although their websites have grown. TikTok, though, has continued to see growth through the pandemic as people look for quick, easy entertainment. This reminds me, note to self, I'm deinstalling my TikTok app and keeping it away from my son. So remind me. Sports and gaming, for all those that have kids and some adults as well, because Major League Sports had to take a break. ESPN took a huge hit. On the flip side, gaming sites like Twitch that allow users to stream have seen increasing growth, and sports have become a real alternative for some. mobile game revenues in 2020 will account for 48% of the global games market. I want to thank you again, and the PowerPoint is available. Feel free to reach out to me. And wanted to end with with two quotes, actually. One from Steve Jobs: "Innovation distinguishes between a leader and a follower." And Martin Luther King says, I think very, very poetically, "We must accept finite disappointment, but we must never lose finite hope." Thank you very much for listening, and thank you for the team.
Wow, thank you, Harry. And you really ended, your presentation with the hope. And of course, you can see across the industries there is a lot which is, being taught to us by the situation. But at the same time, I'm quite confident that I think we will come back, or will come up like a phoenix. And I think probably we will land into new normal. I think there are a lot of questions, and I can see the enthusiasm from all the participants who are on the call now. What we can do is we'll take 1 minute break probably, and then join again, stay on the line, and let's discuss this with these two eminent speakers, the questions that you have in mind. And of course, you can actually post your questions live as well now. Welcome back. So I have plenty of questions here. What I've tried to do is that, I have clubbed the questions as per the topics. So we can start with the virus and the vaccine. So Gökhan Bey, first question to you. How virulent is the COVID virus? Is the virus more infectious, than before? And will the mutation of the virus continue?
The ability of the variants to cause severe disease or its pathogenicity is still unclear. There are three main variants of concern now, as you may know. One of them is B117 UK variant, which is believed to increase the transmission 50%, and also may increase severity of the disease and maybe related mortality. But fortunately, it's expected to have minimal impact on vaccine efficacy. And this UK variant rapidly became the dominant strain of infection in the UK, and since then it's reported more than 100 countries. There is the other variant, B1351 South Africa variant. It's also 50% more contagious, and it's reported now more than 60 countries. The variant carries 9 mutations to its spike, and one of them is known as E484K, which is important because it helps the variant bypass immune defenses. So it's believed that it does not cause increase in severity of disease, but decreases vaccine effectiveness. Though there is no evidence that B1351 increases severity of illness, but the expectation is that this can lower the protection of current vaccines and can reinfect people who have recovered from COVID-19. However, just last week, recent data of Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine showed high efficacy in South Africa, South African patients. So maybe clinically, when you put the plasma of the vaccinated people and the antibodies, check the antibodies effectiveness against the SARS-CoV-2, maybe there's a decrease of antibody neutralization, but clinically, based on this data, we can say the vaccine still continue the effectiveness because it was 100% effective in South Africa, and probably there are many patients with this variant.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah. And there is the third variant, the last one, P1. It's first seen in Japan and Brazil. It's much more transmissible, 2.2 times more transmissible, but does not increase the severity, can cause reinfection, and expected to decrease the vaccine effectiveness. But about this effectiveness, we need to see the clinical trial results. As I said, maybe clinically all vaccines are effectively working on all these variants. We will see that when we see the clinical trial results.
I mean, thank you, Gökhan. But just wanted to add a few things here. Like we already saw double mutants happening in some parts of Southeast Asia, and so it already tells us that the virus will keep mutating,
Yes.
and there is a variance in the vaccines that we have and the efficacy of the vaccine. Of course, what we are trying to achieve through the vaccine is rather keep the patients into the zone where they are basically kept away from the hospital or the severity of the disease. But does it mean that we have to take vaccines every year like flu vaccine?
It is not known yet. There are new starting or ongoing clinical trials to check this kind of booster doses after 6 months or after 1 year, after you receive the first initial doses of the vaccine, if we will need that. As you said, mutations are common and viruses mutate all the time. But in most cases, these mutations have no or minimal effects. Sometimes the virus can get worse or more virulent, but sometimes it can also get more weakened. So, about the booster doses, again, we need to wait the data. I think probably we will have data end of 2021 or 2022, but the expectation is, as you know, for influenza flu vaccine, there is the annual updates of the vaccine.
Yeah.
For coronavirus, the mutations per year are not so frequent. So maybe during the pandemic, we will have this regular repeat doses, 6 months or 1 year, but after pandemic, it may not be annual, but every other 2-3 years, we may have an updated vaccine for coronavirus as well. That's the expectation. We will see the data.
Thank you, Gökhan. In fact, that takes me to the next question, which is still going to you, because it's related to the pharma industry as such. Because one good thing is that what I have seen is that the challenge that came in front of us was taken up by the industry as a combined challenge, and we formed a consortium, we started helping each other, and therefore actually we could respond faster than before. And you already showed that in your presentation, how we could collapse some of the timelines while doing parallel clinical trials. And therefore, we could actually respond to this challenge within less than a year, I would say. If we have a commercialized product within less than a year on the market. What I wanted to ask you is this the new normal for pharma industry? Will the clinical developments happen like this, or clinical trials will happen like this, and we'll have substantial saving in time as well as cost when it comes to clinical development of new assets?
Well, of course, for COVID-19, things were accelerated by all parties, not just pharma, also by governments, ethics committees, institutions, hospitals, investigators. I think it will not be accelerated this way like COVID, but there is still room to be accelerated. Maybe this will have an impact, and in new normal, we will have faster clinical trials using also the digitalization technologies. I think I also want to add, usually pharmaceutical companies compete with each other. We know that. But
all companies.
yeah. So, but vaccine development during this ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, it tells the other side of the story. So, under this kind of crisis situation, pharma companies also collaborated very well, I have to say. During the development, like Pfizer BioNTech, it's co-development, but also for production. Just days ago, I saw a deal by White House. Merck announced that it will start manufacture the Johnson & Johnson coronavirus vaccine. Sanofi made an agreement with 12 BioNTech manufacture COVID-19 vaccine. So I think for all companies, all economies, it's the interest of the overall pharmaceutical industry for the pandemic to end, also for all humanity. So we see great collaboration examples during this period. So this kind of approach also, accelerate all the process, because it's not just the pharma development, the production is very critical. And to finish this pandemic, it's not enough. We have all the billions of doses of vaccines, but we have to provide this to all people all over the world, diversity. And I think production is very critical, that we have sustained production, plus the export from the countries producing this vaccine is critical. So the borders should be open and provided to all countries, even the poor countries, poor people should be able to reach this vaccine. Otherwise, we cannot finish the pandemic and the mutations will continue as well. There's this risk.
No, absolutely. Collaboration is really a game changer. In fact, now Pfizer vaccine is being produced by Novartis, which is also quite interesting.
Yes, yeah.
You talked about digitalization, Gökhan. Let me bring Ari here now, and he already talked about something AI. I think you can elaborate that Ari, a little more. I wanted to know from you is how, of course, it could be expansion of the thought that you already put on the table, but how AI can really transform the business, the way we operate, especially media and healthcare.
So what's happening is that we're collecting an enormous amount of data. We could talk about the pharma industry, the pharma space specifically. The amount of data that companies are collecting is just enormous, and it's growing by the second. Our current computers right now, our storage facility, they're not going to be able to keep up with the storage capacity, even though storage is really, really cheap right now. But speeds are absolutely critical. In order to process all of this data, you're going to need something, and that's something we believe is quantum computing. And certainly, there's a consensus amongst all the technologists that there's no question that the answer is going to be AI. It will take some time, some significant time, probably at least 10 years until where quantum computing comes down to the consumer, to the end user level. But from a B2B perspective, we're seeing it happen right now, although on a limited scale.
Right. And how about media?
Media also, everything from breaking down the numbers that come behind a lot of the media, the users. It's going to come down to speed, and speed equates to quality. And whether it's a cable company, a telecom company, a large Fortune 500 company, they're going to need some form of quantum computing to be able to compete. And I think the word there is compete.
Absolutely. No, in fact, and it's not hypothetical anymore. In fact, you remember, Ari, we were talking about this company called Exscientia from Oxford. See, this company has already brought their first asset into phase 1 using AI, collapsing almost 5 years of the clinical development, into just 1 year. But this is a quite interesting expression I would have, that it normally takes for every, people around, or outside the pharma world, it takes roughly around 25 years of 40 PhD doctors put together, their experience put together, to produce one product from development to commercialization. Whereas AI can do thousands of multiple, molecular dynamics within 40 minutes. So you can imagine that what AI can really change into clinical development, no doubt about it. Having said so, Aris, question to you again, will AI, will really make a difference to normal human life?
There's no question. I was thinking about the challenges or what problems are going to arise from AI as well, and a reason why people should start thinking about AI pretty seriously is the labor force. The question is, whether or not is AI technology or related technology going to replace people, and that's certainly up for debate. As it relates to the ongoing growth, there's no question the key word is acceleration. Like what you said, specifically in the biotech space, it's going to get people healthier a lot quicker. You said it's 25 years, which could be shrunken down to 40 minutes, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. So you can imagine in 30 or 40 years, we're talking about only, down to a couple of seconds. And it's going to free up a lot of people's time to be able to focus on other areas. And I think we're going to see, specifically for pharma, healthcare, biotech, a direct return on investment with the technology. And that's why it's important for people to have that conversation right away. And if you're a sole proprietor, an entrepreneur, a small business, there's a huge opportunity today because the space is not crowded. But I could imagine in the next 24 months, the business landscape is going to change dramatically.
No, absolutely. In fact, we are social creatures. Means we sapiens actually draw our success or attribute our success to our community living. And we want to go back to that normal as well. But of course, may not be exactly that normal, but we want to watch sports together. We want to be in the restaurants together. We want to be in the social life, back to social life. And there's one thing which is holding us back, is something called herd immunity. So let me go back to Gökhan again. Gökhan, people are talking about herd immunity, and there are a lot of percentages being attached to what kind of percentage of a population has to be immunized, or has to be resistant, or has to be, tolerant to the virus. What is your opinion on this? Whether we will ever be able to achieve herd immunity or not?
Well, the expectation is if we will be able to have a herd immunity for COVID-19, it will be around 70% to be vaccinated. And as you may remember on my slides, I've shown if the projections, if we can meet the projections, the targets by end of 2021, 70% of the world can be vaccinated. But it's just about the distribution of the vaccines as well all over the world to all countries, so we can have the herd immunity.
So what you're saying to me is that, okay, the 22 soccer World Cup we will watch together, sitting next to each other.
I really hope so. I really hope so.
Yeah, well, that's great, actually. But that's the statistics, of course, we would like to hear about, and that's what I call it as a hope. There's one more thing, that reminds me. What we have learned last year and this year again, that our face-to-face interaction in most of the businesses have drastically gone down and partially replaced by either a virtual communication like we are having today, or virtual engagement in the business. Now, Ari, my question to you is, will this continue or will this change?
So I think that we're talking here about this is a real alternative. I think, like what you said at the end of the day, there's nothing like getting on a plane, meeting a client, meeting a partner, shaking their hand and looking at them face to face. So I don't believe, we're ever going to see a full replacement for that. However, this has become a real solid alternative. And something that's on demand, which is amazing. You don't necessarily have to wait to meet the person. You could schedule a call and immediately you can feel that connection, although it's not a connection like you have face to face. But this has become an option, and we're seeing this with corporations right now, giving them options. Would you like to work remote? Or would you like to work in person? And it turns out that the percentages are significantly higher for productivity when they're working at home. And I don't think people would have expected that. But I think, because maybe they're looking to get away from their kids and closing themselves in a closet, so they're able to work longer. And the technology is so good. So I think that this is going to be a real alternative. And I anticipate that the number of people in the workforce is going to be about 50-50 versus people in the workforce, people in person versus people at the office. And I think it's certainly, and the third point is that it's become acceptable. Phone calls were certainly very, very challenging. We didn't have video technology. Today, we saw post-COVID that things are working. Remote learning specifically worked really well. All things considered, sure, you had kids, not logging in and their attention span was somewhat limited, but things did function and things did continue. So that creates, I think, a lot of hope for for conversations to be had off the grid if you are actually over online?
I have a very interesting live question. I think we can debate, it's not specific to anybody to that matter. And therefore, I would like to invite both eminent speakers to, give their perspective on this. So the question is, will the pandemic end up having a positive or negative effect on our corporate diversity?
Go ahead, doctor.
Well, I think that will be my personal opinion. Globalization already started several years ago, I think. So, like in our company now, in the past, not just in our company, in several pharma companies, the R&D were based in some specific countries, and people working on pharma R&D, the central roles, were placed in those countries. But for the last 5 to 10 years, we see regionalization, and the central roles, even the central roles, are now distributed through all over the world. So I think globalization already started, and with this pandemic, the acceleration of digitalization and use of digital technologies will accelerate that globalization as well. That's my thinking. But how will this have an impact in the future? How this pandemic will go? Of course, we will not know it 100%.
It's a learning, yes. We are in a learning phase. What do you think, Ari?
Yeah, I would echo the same sentiment as Dr. Duman. Look, this has been every sector, and I'd say about 85 to 90% of the sectors out there have been affected negatively. Those numbers can't be negotiated. The 10, 15%, there are companies and sectors that did see an increase of business. But I do think we will go back to a normal. I will debate and argue that what we're living with now and what's going to happen in the next year or two won't be the new normal, meaning that I do think life will go on. And it's unfortunate because, we forget things, and that's just human nature. We forget what things were like, what precautions we used to take. But I do believe that things will go back to normal. And I do think at a level that's 100%. I don't believe that things will go back to 90%. I think life will go on. Whether or not we take the proper precautions, so maybe it doesn't happen again, I hope so, but I definitely do believe things will go back to how it was pre-COVID.
Absolutely. In fact, speaking from the positive perspective, I already see that I think we can take the subconscious biases out of our working life. When we are virtual, what matters the most is our ability to engage in a short span of time with a variety of groups, and our ability to deliver the message, in a concise form. I think probably that matters the most. And if that is the case, all other noise around us, it will be diffused. So I definitely see something positive in the virtual world, how we operate. Of course, there are some negatives. And as Gökhan Bey said, that probably it's a learning process for all of us. Let's, go through it and then we understand more. But then one important question. So Ari, may I come back to you? On the new world order, you can go by your choice. You want to take either economy or politics, whatever it is, or both, But how the new world order would look like?
Let me attack the politics, although I typically don't cover that on television, but I'd love to take a crack at that. I would say we're going to be seeing a lot of lobbying for better healthcare, better application service products to make sure that this stuff doesn't happen. I think education among our politicians is going to be absolutely critical to be able to create safety nets moving forward. So I think that a pandemic of anything of this sort is going to be a continuous conversation in Washington, D.C. and Capitol Hill. So, it was never a conversation prior. I believe it's obviously been a conversation now, and I think it's going to continue for years to come.
And that brings me to the favorite topic that I have in my mind, which I wanted to ask, you, and of course, Gökhan Bey from pharmaceutical side, you can say as well. But if I have to invest my $1 tomorrow, how do I invest? Where do I invest? Of course, there are a lot of people on the webinar today who are futuristic as well. So what we really wanted to understand that how the world will turn around, and where are the opportunities that we can go. I mean, of course, there are new sectors, new segments, and there are lots of opportunities, I would say. So Hari, what do you see in New York? You're sitting right at the hub there. And Gökhan Bey, you manage a huge, huge region, I would say. So that much of diversity you can bring in the thought.
Sure. I believe wholeheartedly that biotech, pharma, and e-commerce is going to see the greatest growth just based on the statistics that are out there right now. So that's on the industry level. The specific applications that's going to drive the growth on both sides is going to be artificial intelligence. So investments in startups in the space, I think, is going to be really, really lucrative, assuming you could pick the right company. So biotech, e-commerce is my favorite. I've been in the space for a while. And then underneath that, as a foundation, is going to be AI. And I think that's a space that people should watch.
What do you think about clean energy?
Clean energy is also, it's today, it's not the future. The space is very, very crowded within every subsector of clean energy. As a small company, I think it's very, very hard to break into it today. 15, 20, 25 years ago, it would have been a different conversation. And also you've got the politics all around clean energy as well. There's less politics or almost no politics in conversations as it relates to artificial intelligence. So I'd say it's a safer bet, if you will.
Right. And Gökhan Bey, in pharmaceutical industry, do I invest only in those companies who produce vaccines or no? I'm just joking.
No, there are a lot of diseases where we have unmet medical need, to be honest. And I totally agree with Ari. Biotech is very important. And maybe I can just add that the companies which can adjust as quickly as possible to the new normal. And there, the artificial intelligence, digitalization will be a critical point, of course. The fast adapters will win, I think. So maybe you need to follow those companies. And the companies will make this science fiction we see in movies real science in the near future. So because things are really accelerated. So those companies will win, I think.
I would say, if I may, Avinash, last comment on my side. I think it's absolutely critical. I know there's a lot of Fortune 1000 companies on this call and some great business leaders. Partnerships immediately, and I know a lot of large corporations currently do have partnerships with smaller companies. Smaller companies are the ones that are able to pivot quicker than larger companies. And that's where innovation is born. So I think those partnerships have to be doubled down ASAP for things to move forward quickly.
Just a supplementary question to what you're saying, Ari, it's a live question. What do you think Bitcoin, the monetary future of it, or is it just a cloud?
I think, and not to take a gloom and doom opinion on it, but as an actual currency, I have a problem seeing it being in use and mass adoption. I do believe the U.S. monetary system does work. It works very efficiently, although there are issues, and whenever you have a complicated structure, you're going to have pockets of inefficiencies. So I do have a hard time seeing Bitcoin taking off as a transactional based currency. A lot of people would strongly disagree with me. We're seeing Tesla and PayPal adopting it. So an argument certainly could be made against that. I think obviously the underlying technology is what it's all about. It's blockchain technology, which is going to again disrupt every single industry across every single sector. So I'm bullish on the technology, questionable, bearish on it as a monetary exchange. I also think that if it does get adapted, we're going to see it as a real alternative asset class. The difficult side of, because of the volatility, the difficult side of that, obviously, if something happens with Bitcoin, we're talking about a very, very serious dent in our financial system. So if you're a trader out there, trade, make a lot of money. Just buyer beware. I love the technology. Again, skeptical on it as a currency.
Right. So let me bring everybody back to the pharma industry. And there's a question here. What should be the key priorities for the pharma industry in the coming years, given the backdrop of COVID is going to stay for some more time? I think probably both of us, we can take this, So Gökhan, let me start and then I'll hand it over to you. The way I see it, of course, I see it as a glide path, short term, mid-term, long-term. See, short-term, probably this 2021, the entire industry has to really focus on maximizing the vaccine production and immunize the world as early as possible, as Gökhan already said. The second thing is, I think also we should, we as an industry should stay in our consortium, but also in our individual capacity to continue to produce and distribute products without any break in the supply chain. I think this is a short-term objective that we should have in front of us. In the midterm, I would say, because of COVID, there are a lot of other comorbidities, patients suffering from other chronic diseases. I think their treatment outcome is being lost because they're not being treated properly. And the industry has come a long way to treat these patients and bring up a certain, treatment outcome. And of course, it would be a sad casualty, if we do not actually treat them regularly, because they need this treatment. So probably in the midterm, we have to find ways and means that in the future, if we have a pandemic-like situation, how do we actually continue to bring the patients to the hospital or bring the treatment to the patients, either of this? And probably the innovation piece has to really, work on this. And in the long term, I think probably both the speakers touched upon using AI in order to reduce the research and development timelines, also reducing the cost, and then joining hands with the stakeholders like governments in order to make innovation accessible at affordable cost. Probably that could be the priorities for pharma industry, means in all three horizons that I see it. But let me also ask Gökhan the way he sees it from his side.
I agree with you, what you said, Avinash. I can just add, we all talked about the vaccines today, but there's also a lot of work ongoing about vaccines are preventative treatments, There's also a lot of work going on reactive treatment like antivirals or monoclonal antibodies. So after you got ill, how we treat COVID-19. So there are a lot of molecules now in development or to be approved. So short-term, I think vaccines and other treatments modalities like antivirals or monoclonal antibodies or anti-inflammatory drugs will be focus of pharma business. But of course, oncology or other rare diseases where we have unmet medical needs, this will continue to be developed, need to be developed. There are diseases which can be aggravated by COVID-19. So we have to treat all of them, So that's how I see short-term. Things in short-term.
I have two last questions, one to Gökhan and one to Ari. Gökhan, question to you, short question. When can we buy the vaccines? So far, it's been provided by the government.
Well, good question. Everybody is curious about that. To be honest, I don't know. And it's hard to say. It may be different from country to country, from vaccine to vaccine, from company to company, or, not just the companies are working to develop vaccines, but also there are governments developing vaccines and producing vaccines. So it will. There are a lot of dependencies, but as far as I know, COVID vaccines will not be in the market in 2021. Some vaccines maybe in 2022, some vaccines even 2023. So currently, vaccines are sold to governments, and it's distributed by the under government's control.
Right. And as you said, there are 63 assets in the development. 121 clinical trials so far in the process, 200,000 patients being employed already, into the trial. So 2022, if we will be able to buy, I think that will be great. And then probably we will be a little bit of, at least, some kind of a freedom, I would say, to roam around. One last question to Ari. Ari, we talked about so many things, but there's one thing which is very important to all of us, which is work-life balance. And we thought that at the start of the pandemic, working from home is what do you say? Is a godsend, opportunity. But somewhere in the middle of pandemic, we realized, no, this is really disturbing our work-life balance. What do you think about it? How do you see this will go in the future?
Sure. So I always share when I'm asked the question when I'm on the speaking circuit in terms of creating that balance or at least letting yourself have the opportunity for that balance. I always share it's kind of like flying a plane. Technically, you could fly a plane with one engine. Not ideal, but optimal is obviously two engines, and one engine I look at as your family, personal, anything that has to do with that, and then the other engine I look at as your business. So you kind of need to create that balance. That's the first thing. And second thing I think, which is critical, is just unplugging, recharging. Interesting, LinkedIn just came out with last week that they're giving off people 1 week. And it's a big company. They have about 17,000 employees. They want to create an environment where people could just completely unplug and start training people on ways to avoid burnout. So life balance is absolutely critical. Finding a hobby, and don't say work is a hobby, although it's my hobby, and I do think it's a hobby for everyone. But trying to do something outside of the work environment gives you the opportunity to recharge and then to revisit.
Super. Thank you, both of you. I think it was very engaging discussion. I would like to invite Muriel Anam now. She leads UBP Bank in Turkey, and she has been keeping her eyes and ears open to rather hear about the hope all the time. This is what she's been asking me. She is my co-member on Swiss Chamber of Commerce. So Muriel, I'm towards you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you have enjoyed the webinar. As the Vice President of the Swiss Chamber, I would like to extend my gratitude to Mr. Julien Thöni, Consul General of Switzerland, Dr. Avinash Potnis, Managing Director of Novartis Pharma Turkey, Dr. Gökhan Duman, Director of Clinical Sites Operations Pfizer, and our international speaker, Mr. Zoldan, CEO of Quantum Media, for all their insights and their valuable time. Of course, I would also like to thank all our members, and last but not least, all our participants. As a token of appreciation, we have done a donation on behalf of our panelists, Dr. Potnis, Dr. Duman, and Mr. Zoldan, to the World Wildlife Fund, WWF. Please accept it as a small gift. I would also like to thank once again all our participants and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.